Hi everyone, I welcome you all in the today's podcast, and I'm Chavi, your podcaster of the day. And in the Azure Developer Community's today podcast, we have Samuel with us. He has an amazing experience of over a decade, and with that, he's currently a senior software engineer, and also it's been more than 5 years that he has been contributing to the Microsoft community as a MCT, and also he's an MVP as well. So with that, I welcome you, Samuel, in the today's podcast.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's exciting to always share, the little bit we have when it comes to Azure, and I'm excited to be here. Hopefully, we're gonna have a interesting conversations, and let's see how that goes.
Exactly. I'm also looking for something very much insightful and amazing conversation with you. So, first of all, I would be very happy to know, how you started your Azure journey, because, you have been contributing to the MCT part for more than 5 years. So, obviously, you must be loving Azure a lot. So, how it has been, and what are the things that you are experiencing now, as well
Yeah,
as the person who has been contributing to Azure.
yeah. So it's interesting how I got started. I would say that's probably um, somewhere 10 years ago, and this was when I first moved to the US. So originally, I'm from Accra, Ghana. I'm currently based in Accra, Ghana, but up until 2019, I was living and working in the United States, and then I decided to come back home. So that is where I started picking bits and pieces of it. I went for one community event, and they're talking about Azure. I was like, then it wasn't it was, I think it was Windows. Is it Windows Azure? It wasn't Microsoft. It had a name, Windows Cloud something, and they were talking about it. And for me, then in my company, we're doing a lot of on-premise things. We had an on-premise data center. It was this long room with all the servers and blasting air conditions and stuff like that. And we also had another disaster recovery site in, I think it was in Washington State. So at this meetup, people were talking about how you could save costs. You didn't have to worry about the infrastructure, the scaling, and all that. So almost immediately, I could relate to what was happening in my company, because if we needed to scale up, I remember David, a very great guy. He would send a request. I need to buy a new hardware. I need to buy more memory. I need to and then they'll go through this long chain of procurement and forth and back. So I was like, wait a minute. If this cloud thing is what they, if this whole cloud thing that they're talking about is, is what it is, then I think it's worth interesting to look into it. Now, I mean, fun fact. I mean, right from when I was growing up, like when I was a kid and started to understand, computers and technology, I have always been a fan of Microsoft. I think I was biased with Microsoft. For a long time, even when I was growing up, I even thought of having my own company, AfriSoft instead of Microsoft, because I was so into that whole Microsoft ecosystem. Unfortunately, that was registered, so I couldn't get AfriSoft. I ended up with something called AfriLogic, but that's something for another conversation. So there was the love for Microsoft product. I must admit that I think there was another competitor that was running cloud things, but I don't know why I got hooked so much to this particular Microsoft one. And then since then, it was just attending one meetup after the other on it, reading on it, signing up, and all that. And then eventually it became clearer. So fast forward a couple of years down the line, I started pushing it. I became my company had this project called they wanted to build champions. So champions in an organization where one person would be, let's say, a champion of DevOps, and someone would be a champion in something else. So I was like, you know what, I want to be the champion for cloud, and then specifically Azure. Exactly. So I started, learning, training, reading all the resources, traveling to Seattle, just going to all the places where there was, any meetup or meeting concerning the Azure cloud, or then the Windows cloud. And yeah, fast forward today, here we are. I mean, it's been an interesting journey. I use it most of the time. I have production stuff on it. I have side gigs on it. I have fun things on it, and it's exciting. But one of the things that really got me hooked on Azure, and that was what sold it for me, was Logic Apps, because I was known to be the automation guy. Like, anybody wants to do some form of automation, they're like, Sam is good, Sam is your go-to guy. Like, how do we automate there? So it was Logic Apps that really, really, really got me hooked onto Azure, because I was like, I could go into Logic Apps, I could just drag and drop things, and it's pretty much working. I didn't have to write a lot of code, SDKs, clients. I was like, you know what, I'm sold. So that was what really hooked me into it. And yeah, the journey has been smooth. I mean, there's always been issues here and there, but then in general it's been a good experience. So I've actually seen all the evolutions that Azure has gone through. I've seen the periods where having competitors. I mean, I've seen all that. So that's just the interesting but funny journey of how I got into Azure. Yeah.
That was pretty much amazing, and also I really liked how you took every step very like nicely and also wisely at the same time. Because sometimes people just like move to a particular domain by just thinking,
Mm,
okay, people are going in that domain, let me also step into that.
mm,
So it's actually a wise decision that you took, and like it's pretty much working well for you at the same time. So like as when I saw your profile, I felt like talking more about your community that you have in your
mm,
region. So like I have seen a lot of times on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well that African community is working pretty much amazingly.
yeah.
Like we have seen communities in every in like various regions, but when you talk about African communities, they are working amazingly, and also
Mm,
like the contributions that they are having and the professionals that we have in Africa, they are amazing. So in that case, like tell us something about
mm.
how all these things started and how it's working in the present time as well.
Yeah. Interesting. There's also a backstory to that. It's good to know that from 2019 till now, there's been very rapid growth when it comes to tech communities, especially the Azure communities in Africa. And I'll be specific on Ghana, Nigeria, because I have seen that evolution. I've been part of that evolution. So back in the US, when I was in the States, like I mentioned, I was going for a lot of meetups. So I was in the on the west side of the city where I was in the US. Now, the major or the only Azure user group that was in it was Beaverton, that was then in Oregon, was on the east side, which was like downtown. And trust me, almost every time where they have meetings or there's going to be a meetup, the traffic driving from the west side of town to downtown, because that is rush hour. Everybody's closed and people are going. So there's a lot of traffic. So a lot of people found it difficult, and most times it was probably during working hours in the Microsoft building in downtown. So a lot of people, even though they loved Azure, they wanted to do a lot of things, we're not able to make it, to the east side or downtown for the Azure meetings. So myself and another colleague in the company, I was like, Felix, he's now in Microsoft, he's not working in Microsoft himself. So I was like, Felix, I think we should start a user group in the area. And I was like, yeah, that will not be, a bad idea. I was like, yeah, let's start, because it's going to better serve those of us in this side of town. But then what we can do is that we just have to make sure that we are in communication with the main group, so that we kind of keep it in sync. So people don't feel I have to go to this one and go to this one. So ideally, if we get started and people get used to this one, we can actually communicate and determine, hey, this is our calendar. So whatever we're going to do here, the same thing will be done on the other side. So you don't have to rush trying to go for all the meetups. Initially it was quite challenging, because then we had to find a venue, a bigger enough venue that will support us, and I mean, I'll say a big thank you to, two great people. Jodan, he's an awesome community guy. Like, he's a veteran, but then US Air Force veteran, but he's so passionate about communities. Like, and he was the founder of the main, Portland Azure user group. So we did some research, found out, and then we reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, Joe, myself and we're just trying to start another user group because," and he was so welcoming. I remember he took us to one of the pubs. We sat there, we had drinks, and then he was giving us ideas. We can start this way, we can do this way. We need this, and it was amazing. Then he brought in Nick. He was then with Soft Source Consulting. Thank you, Soft Source. They gave us the very first space. So Soft Source gave us a very first space to do our very first meetup. And surprisingly, the very first meetup we did, we had about 20 people. And funny thing was, people always say this. People ask me, Sam, how do you do this? Like, you do live streams, you do podcasts, you do, and I told them, look, it's also because I have a very supportive partner. Like, my wife understands that I'm passionate about these things, so she tries a lot to support and encourage me. I remember the very first meetup, my wife was there. She brought the pizza, and we were like, we're hoping, we just kept our fingers crossed. Will people come? Will people come? Because that's like a very first meetup. They But like I said, Joe and Nick made a lot of noise. They talked about it, and we had about 20 people show up, and that was like amazing for a very first meetup. You know, so after the very first session, people were like, "Wow, that's interesting. You guys have got, you've got what we want." So we started serverless, functions, agile functions. I still have the slides for those very first, sessions. So people fell in love with it, and then that is how we started the Azure user group, the Beaver Team Azure user group. Now, I think getting closer to me coming back home, I realized that then, I mean, before I left Ghana, I didn't know the concept of meetup. Like, I didn't know the concept of, like, something like that where professionals hang out to talk technology and sometimes just to. So I love the concept. But over the years, it had started picking up in Ghana, to be specific. So I went onto LinkedIn and went into meetup.com, and I was looking for any Azure user group in Accra, which is the city I am now. And I realized that there was a .NET user group, but there wasn't like an Azure user group. So I was like, okay, it wouldn't make sense that someone has a user group. I mean, .NET and Azure, pretty much, they are like, you know what? So why don't I reach out to this guy and let him know that, look, I'm relocating, I'm coming home, I run this user group. I would love to co-organize with you so that you have a lot of resources and stuff to go. So I reached out. I checked on his LinkedIn. It was Frank Odum. Now we are business partners. We are good friends. We do a lot of things together. So I started talking. So I spoke to Frank for a year. We're chatting a year. I mean, just planning how that was going to happen. And I came down. So as soon as I came down, I had a meeting with him. We started talking. And before I left for the United States, somewhere in 2010, I was actually teaching. I was also instructing in NIT. I'm sure probably India, you're probably familiar with NIT. So I was working in one of the companies that had the NIT franchise here. I was training .NET, Adobe Technologies, Oracle, Maya Technology. So I had kind of like a relationship with the school. And even when I was in the States, anytime, every year I came to Ghana on holidays, I would organize a workshop in NIT. So I went there and I was like, hey guys, you know what? I want to start a meetup community here. So I want you to give us space so that every month we'll be hosting meetups here, and also help the students, to learn what's happening. And then, the guy was a good friend of mine. Yeah, I'm wanting. He's also now in Microsoft. So it was like, yeah, I mean, let's do this. So we got the space. I got, we started putting out ads, and it was just amazing. So every month we started hosting Azure events, talking about, stuff like that. So that's how we started before COVID hit. And then COVID, pretty much broke things apart. But that's how the journey started. I must say that it was encouraging because then it came with some kind of revival and new spirit. And I remember just around 2019, we got a call from our friends in Nigeria. They were like, guys, we're having a summit. We want you to come to Nigeria, and then just join us. And we did that, and that was where a lot of the things exploded. Things exploded into power, into I mean, it was amazing. And from that time till now, a lot of the communities have grown from strength to strength. A lot of the ones are coming up. People are getting more educated and exposed to Azure. People are talking about it. There's a lot more use. There's more presence. So yeah, that's been the journey so far. I think it's been an interesting one. Yeah.
It was so amazing to hear that, and also it felt so good. I can like every word you said, I can feel that, because to be honest, community is something which is very much close to my
Yeah.
heart as well.
Yeah.
And also, as you talked about Frank, I had a podcast with him as well. He is an amazing person at the same
Yeah.
time, and from that only I thought of talking about more about the community in your region, because to be honest, like whenever I see those posts on socials about African
Mm,
community, it always it's something that I cannot explain in words, but it
mm.
always helps me in understanding more about the community, and also it feels so good when I see those posts. So adding to it, I also wanted to know that like as you like shared the whole thing, but like what like according to you, what would be the future of African community, and also like what do you think like how it is forming, and how youth is reacting to all these things that is currently going in the community?
I think it's gonna grow. It's still gonna keep growing. The only, I won't say challenge, but the only things we have to start adjusting to is, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of friends and people I have in Microsoft and in the region, is just to make it a lot more available. And I'll talk about something that one of the challenges that I had the very moment we came down trying to get Azure to people. So one of the challenges was access to Azure itself. Okay, access to the platform. So if you're not working in a company that already has Azure, or if you're not an MCT and have access to it, or if you're not an MVP, or if you're not a student ambassador, right? For the ordinary person who wants to learn Azure, who wants to have access to it, and is partaking in this community event and wants to go and probably try out some of the things that we're sharing, access to Azure itself is was a problem, because all these people, not all of them have credit cards. To go create free, even the free accounts, you need some kind of credit cards. And it has been something I've been pushing, especially the African Development Center for. I mean, all the Microsoft staff on Africa, that look, on the African continent, mobile money is very predominant. Like M-Pesa, mobile. So let's figure out how you can allow some of these people to even sign up for Azure using mobile money. All right, because everybody technically has mobile money, and that is going to give them more access to it, because the competitor is more known today. If you sample people and you ask, hey, if you are building a very small application, which of the cloud platforms should you put it, they might mention the competitor, right? But until you tell them, but hey, you can do this on Azure, right? And they'll be like, really? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, do you know there are like tons and tons of free services on Azure you can use forever? It's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. It's like, and it's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, do you see my daily tweet that comes up with motivation every morning? I was like, yeah, that's running on Azure. I don't pay anything. It's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. So a lot of them would want to try them, but I mean, they don't really know. So that's where the community comes in. And that's why I've said I've seen the community grow. So I've seen the number of people who now know what Azure is, who now are using it, who want to learn it. Initially, if you pick like 10 people, maybe you get maybe 2 out of the 10 saying I know Azure. But now, if you pick 10 people, you can get between 5 to 6 saying that, hey, I know Azure, and that's good. So I just see a growth path, and I'm sure that Microsoft putting ADCs in Kenya and Nigeria, and the presence now is going to actually motivate and encourage a lot of people to understand it, and the community has a big role to play. So some of us, need to be technically are the foot soldiers, right? Because yeah, ADCs can be there, all the stuff, but it is us on the ground that are going using our communities. Because imagine in that community, you have colleagues from work, you have people from schools, you have people from other places. So what they learn there goes into the classroom, goes into the office, goes into all these other places. So we play a major role. And I see that if we get the more support we get from Microsoft, the more we can get this available for people, and the more, that whole ecosystem will grow. But to put it in short, a simple plain English, I see the trajectory just growing.
That was really great, and also those insights were very much amazing to hear. And again, like whenever I talk about African community, it makes me feel so good because, like, it's so much growth that we can see. And also, as you mentioned, like again, I personally feel like there's a lot of things that still people don't know, like
Mm,
as you mentioned about the free courses and the things.
yeah,
So again, we actually need more and more people like you to like tell people that yes, there are various free things that are available for you if you want to get started with your journey. And then like when you got the like proper gist, then obviously you can go and pay for it. That's totally fine. But yeah,
yeah.
in the start everything is provided free, and also on the internet still people are not able to find the right resources.
Mm-hmm.
So in that
Mm-hmm.
case, how you actually help people with that? Because as I mentioned earlier as well, it's been more than 5 years that you have been
Yeah.
contributing to Microsoft as an MCT. So in that case, how you help like students and professionals to find the right resources on the internet?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Some years ago, when the internet became very, I mean, internet is barely, it was just in the 90s, so it's not that old, so to speak. One of the things we had problems with was lack of information, because then it was hard to find information. But today there's information overload, explosion everywhere. If you go online right now and you type or Google or whichever one you use, and say, how to do something, you're going to get different results. I mean, with different opinions. You're going to get, people who think something is terrible. On the same thing, you have some people who think it is good. So there's information overload. But one of the easiest way that I have over the years, irrespective of what I'm teaching or what I'm sharing, is to put you in a situation or in a position where you can relate to what you're learning. So what I intend to do is, I sometimes call it bring your own problem sessions. So you come with, oh, in our office, this is the pain point. This is one of the, this is one of our headaches. How do we solve it? And I'm like, okay, so this is the problem. Let's talk through a high level of architecture. We talk about, ideas of how this is going to be. And I was like, okay, now this is just a high level architecture with no technologies mentioned, right? But then once we agree, okay, do we agree with this architecture? Okay, now let's transition into the Azure framework, into the Azure cloud. In this section of it, we can use a service. In this section of it, we can use a service. In this section, we can use a service. In this section, we can use a service. And I'm like, the good thing about it, you can actually have a proof of concept using most of the free tiers and not pay anything, right? To assess and see how that works. And that has worked over time. Another thing that I do is over the 5 so plus years I've been an MCT, every year I do an Azure fundamental class for free. Like that's like, yeah, a free one that I do every year virtually and then also internally. So I have a group of people I mentor and I'm like, it's free, take you through that whole one. And that exposes them to the high level concept of cloud and specifically doing stuff on Azure. And I think that is one way that you can always get a pipeline of people, learning and understanding about Azure. Then also partnering with the student ambassadors. There were initial, I won't say miscommunications, but there was a gap at some point between student ambassadors and MVPs and MCTs. So I would be an MVP, but I didn't know the student ambassadors, right? Which was because there wasn't any platform to say, hey, student ambassadors, these are the MVPs in your area. So if you're doing events on Azure, on AI or whatever, these are the MVPs in your area that you can reach out to that will, help you have that conversation or help you have that, that workshop in your school because that is where you're focused on. So over the years, that has changed. Like as I speak with you, there's another student ambassador in one of the universities in Kumasi who is talking to me on an event he wants to run on Azure. and then we're in the background trying to help him. Okay, so do it this way, do it that way, and then we'll be there to help you talk about, whatever you want to talk about. So that is one way. But I always feel that letting people bring their problems, right, and then solving them or marking them out using what Azure offers is one simple way of letting people understand, okay, you can do this. I remember we're working on a very on an application for applying for some process, and the engineers were the prototype, immediately they jumped. They're going to use a third party cloud storage service. And they're like, oh, with this one, once I upload the pictures, it gives me a unique URL and I can use that URL in application. And I was like, do you know you can do that in Azure? It's like, are you sure? I was like, okay. So I sat them down, and then within like 10-15 minutes, did the same thing, went to provision your storage account, did it, uploaded it, and I was like, this is it. You can even put it. It was like, I never knew you could do this in Azure. I was like, yeah, and you can have a free tier and run this for like, so far as you don't go exceed the quota, you're fine. You know, so that is one way, bringing people, having people bring their problems, and then using solutions provided by Azure to tell them, hey, you can do this. And thankfully, there is now the wall architected framework, which is available for people to use, and in the Azure architecture reference guide. So tons and tons of architectural references. So whether it's industry, oil and gas, government, health, whatever, that it's there. Go show it out to them. Hey, this is a sample architecture you can use to solve your problem. But the key thing is for us to make a lot of noise, for us to share, for us to collaborate, and for us to put it out there.
That was amazing, and like I felt so good having you today in the podcast because we talked so much things, and every word has that feeling of the
Oh yeah.
community that we have in ourselves. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining today, and it was really great having you talking about the African community and how
Yeah.
was it working. So yeah, with that, I would just end this podcast with saying one line.
Hmm.
Never ever forget to contribute to community.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting, it's sometimes it's about giving to the community, and obviously helping the community will surely give you some amazing results.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that note, again, thanks a lot for joining in, and we would surely be coming up with such podcasts super soon.
Yeah. But before we go, I just want to throw this out there. Starting a community, you don't need to be an MVP or MCT, or you don't have to be
Exactly.
a superhero to start a community. All right. A lot of times, I think there's a misconception on what it is. My advice to you as we're closing is that look, even if you have 5 people in your area who are passionate about Azure, right? All it takes is, hey guys, we can meet at this pub once a month or once a what. Let's sit there and just talk about Azure. Let's talk about how we're using it at work, how we're using it at school, what are the challenges we are facing. And then if it's something beyond you, hey, can we reach out to Sam or Frank or Idris or any of the MVPs? Join us for a drink and then let's talk about Azure. That's how it starts. You don't have to be an expert. If you have good organizational skills, bringing people together, bring the people together and call for other, and like myself, Frank, and all the other MVPs in the country, we are willing, more than willing, to show up at your event and speak, because that is what we love to do. So don't be scared. You don't need to have 150, no. You can start as small as 5. And people don't know that you can have as many Azure user groups. You can have as many, right? So even if it's in a small community, create it, put a user group together, and by the time you are building a fan base of people that are passionate and also will take it elsewhere to to grow it. So that's just my advice to you. Just start it.
That was so powerful. Like, and again, saying, like, whenever I talk about community, it makes me feel so good and happy at the same time. So, yeah, like, to be honest, this was a very powerful ending that we are having with this podcast. And, after this, also, I have like put it all his socials in the description. You can check it out. And again, if you want to get start your community, if you want to understand anything about community, you can just get connected with him. He will help you out in any of the community contribution you want to do. And yeah, with that note, I'll just say that yes, just start your contribution. Don't think once that, okay, am I doing right or am I
Yeah.
doing wrong. Just go with that, and it's going to be really great experience.
Yeah.